Hey, 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 I'm Jen SluMac, and this is my book. I wrote it. You ought to read it. I'm going to be on the next episode of So Booking Cool with Jewel B. You ought to come and check it out. I am a mother and a daughter and a sister and a wife and a teacher, and I care about this community, this world, and I know that you do too. Don't act like you don't. You ought to come by and see what we're talking about because we get kind of deep. All right, bye.
So fucking, so fucking, so fucking cool.
It's so motherfucking cool to listen to So Fucking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool, it's Jewel B. In this episode, I chat with the self-proclaimed hope dealer. Her mission is to simply inspire human connection through creating and curating stories that heal. She is a comedian, storyteller, and performer who's appeared on NBC, MTV Logo, and Comedy Central. She has worked and volunteered in jails, prisons, churches, and schools. She is also a speaker, educator, podcaster, and author of the debut novel, Soul, Not Skin, Becoming the Me I Was Meant to Be, which has been praised for its honesty, authenticity, and beautiful prose. In addition to her goal of being an inspiration, she also aims to be a practical catalyst for unity, drawing on personal history to help others rise. Here with us today, she is Jen SluMac. Stay tuned for our conversation, only on So Booking Cool.
Hey, Jen. That is quite an introduction. I had to think for a minute, who is she talking about? Really?
Yeah.
That's something to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Your name is really cool, by the way, Jen SluMac.
It's a shortened version of my real name. My wife and I decided to hyphenate when we got married, and we both have really long last names. So my niece came up with calling us Team SluMac.
Oh, right. Okay, very nice. Speaking of family and everything, can you just say, Jen, like what this time has been like with the pandemic, the quarantine, the social unrest, and now the wildfires and everything? How are you and your loved ones managing during these times?
Right? I'm really fortunate in all of this mess. I'm very fortunate, and I recognize that. That would be my first thing that I would say, is that I count my blessings that I am in a situation that allows this to be a time of rest more than anything. So many people are not in that situation, and there's community groups and ministries and volunteer groups around here who, they bring out food and advocate for safe places, for shelter and all of that. So there's a lot going on in the community myself. I get restless, but I have to trust that God knows what God is doing. I try to stay in the solution, creating stories of overcoming, creating stories and telling stories of people who are surviving even greater odds, or as great of odds. I try to keep my head and my heart in the hope for today and for tomorrow, because I find that, number one, that helps me to feel better, to stay in that mind space, but it also impacts those around me. It also can be a little bit of a light in the chaos. And so my wife knows that I'm not always able to do it. She has to pick me up off the ground from time to time. But overall, staying busy with creativity. I've decided to go back to school. So I'm studying to be an instructional designer, which will just strengthen my capacity to build trainings and help in education as it goes through these next God knows what transitions over the next several years. So I stay busy, trying to be creative and trying not to think too much about me or woe is me, and counting blessings instead of frustrations, and praying for those that I know don't have it, or having even worse struggles than I'm facing.
How much of your life has, having gratitude as well as creativity, in times of darkness and pain, how long has that been a part of your life, Jen?
Uh, it's kind of always been the way. My mother used to say, we do art because we can't afford therapy. She said,
Oh,
my baby Jenny, she's creative. And I used to think, yeah, I have to be. We have to do something with the difficulties. So, I joke about that, and I think that she was saying it in jest. But I've always had to stay connected to hope, and I've always had to stay connected to creating a future that could be better than the one I'm in. So there was some fantasy of, what it might be down the road so that I could escape from what was happening around me. Today, I'm grateful that I've done a lot of work and I've had a lot of different opportunities to learn how to live in the present, whatever is going on, and still have that connection to hope. I don't have to sort of displace myself from the moment, but I've always been a writer. I've always journaled. I've always drawn pictures, morbid, sad, pathetic pictures for most of my adolescence that adorned my walls and probably concerned my mother, but they probably saved my life, I've always wanted to be a singer. I always felt like if I could sing like Whitney Houston or Michael Jackson, or if I could just get on stage and have that energy surround me the way that they did, then I could scream out all of the hurt and it would go away. But nobody needed me screaming, calling it singing. So that's for sure. I didn't do that. It's always been there.
And how did you end up turning to comedy?
I always wanted to be an actress. I always wanted to be an actress who, as a child, I thought to myself when I said it, the way that I said it was, I want to make movies that matter. And what I think I meant by that now is I wanted to tell stories that touch people, that connect us, that allow us to see ourselves in each other, stories of overcoming. And so I always wanted to be an actress, but didn't know how to start. So I saw Gilda Radner once on Saturday Night Live and Jane Curtin, and I thought, wow, I could be silly. I could be silly on TV. Maybe I could do that. So I went to Second City and I studied and I did improv. And I was at Improv Olympic, which is the second second school that I went to study improv in Chicago. And while I was there, Bob Dassey was my instructor, which is neither here nor there, but just me recollecting. And I got frustrated with the scenes. I always found that, I was in scenes that if we ended up in prison, somebody needed to stop, don't drop the soap. If somebody was a person of color, then there was a drug deal happening. If somebody was gay, there was, don't drop the soap. So it always just seemed to go like lowbrow, lowbrow, lowbrow. And I got tired of it. And so I decided if I did stand up, then I could write my own stories. And I think the reason I brought up Bob's name, my teacher, is because he said something to me when I decided to leave improv that wouldn't hit me for until years later. But he said, Jen, maybe if you had more confidence or if you knew how to use your voice, you could direct the scenes in a better way and you wouldn't have to fall. And so I thought that comedy would be the way to do that, stand up, because I could write my own material, but I didn't realize how difficult that was too. So that's how I got into stand up, and it took off pretty quickly. There was a pretty vibrant underground scene in Chicago at the time. And we became sort of this stand up comedy amoeba of knuckleheads going around Chicago. We had a portable microphone and speakers, and we would go up to any restaurant or bar that would have us and ask if we could set up and do comedy that night. And it developed over time into a few steady rooms. And some of the guys that I used to run with are doing really well in Hollywood now. And it's humbling, but a piece of that is knowing that we've all had our own paths, and mine just didn't end up where I thought it would yet.
Jen, definitely what I'm getting is that the human interaction, the creativity, the art, like you said, it's always been there. And even like as far as your work with human connection, you know, as I mentioned in the intro, you've worked in different institutions and stuff, such as schools, prisons, jails, churches. And you say that you don't feel like these are places that really offer rehabilitation for people. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I just, the human being is such a tender thing. And I'll speak specifically to the county jail and the prisons that I've worked in. And probably the schools and the churches will you'll see how that could carry over to that naturally, maybe to a lesser degree, but maybe just a different degree. The jails and the prisons are often filled with people who have never really gotten a first chance, much less, seeking to get a second chance. And the system is set up in a way to clear the streets of what it deems criminal and a threat, and warehouse people, bodies, traumas. And while I certainly was able to gratefully witness handfuls of humane correctional officers or sergeants, I saw my share of the other also. People who just don't have the capacity to corral human beings who are acting out of their trauma, or in compliance, which to me looks like The Walking Dead, breaks my heart. We need systems that are trauma informed. If we're going to warehouse trauma, then we need to have folks who are in that system who are able to be of a mindset that says we need to be healing here, not reprimanding. The reprimanding and the hard knocks and the lack of access and the self-image and all of these things are the very things that brought these individuals here. We don't need to be exacerbating that, and we don't need to have a college for criminality breeding while we're here. What we need to do is we need to prepare folks to experience themselves differently. And we need to restore their humanity to themselves, that their self-image might shift and change. And I think too that we need to do that in the community. One of the things that I noticed when I was inside is I had a student, a gentleman, who had been in my class. I was a teacher inside of the county jail for 7 years, and I taught a class about recovery and addiction, and the process of recovery and the process of addiction, anger management, cycle of trauma, cycle of violence, the broken family system, and how all of that impacts us as adults if we didn't get what we needed as children. And I had this gentleman who came into my class, and probably in his 30s, and was just really quiet and standoffish. And I know that, I know what that is. And the expression of that is oftentimes like, I don't know you, I don't trust you, and I don't want to be here, but it's better than being in myself. So I'm going to sit here quietly and not irritate you, but I certainly, I'm angry about it. Right. So I would work with that and just let him be, just in the very least, give him the space in my classroom to make the decision to be angry about it. And, when he was back in the housing unit, he had to comply. He had to, yes, sir. He had to do all that crap. And in my classroom, I'd let him at least choose how he was or wasn't. Right. So over the course of about 6 months while he was there on his, waiting for trial or waiting for court, we did a lot of work, trauma healing work, and just classroom work, group work, healing work. And he was feeling really good about himself, and he and I had a connection, and he was connecting with the other men. He was mentoring other youngsters in our class, and he was feeling really hopeful. When he was released, he was gone for about 2 months, and he showed back up in my class. And this wasn't uncommon. Guys would come and go frequently. But he came back, and he came up to my desk, and he had tears in his eyes. He said, "Miss Jen, there's nowhere like this. There's nowhere like your class out in the world." He's like, here I was feeling good about myself. Here I was feeling built up, like I could do something, like I could be somebody. And I go back into my community and there's only space for the guy who left. There's only space for the guy who left, man. I can't be the dude I started to become here. Nobody knows it. Nobody understands it. People got names for it. And I'm not strong enough to deal with the name calling and all that stuff. I'm not that well. He said, all I had was a little bit of hope, but I can't. And I decided then that I needed to figure out a way to participate in healing our communities at large, because hopefully one day we will see the end of mass incarceration. That's my prayer. And we need to have communities that can hold themselves together. And this country has done plenty of damage in plenty of ways that has allowed there to be plenty of places that are not strong enough to hold their ground.
And speaking of incarceration as well as transformation, you've worked with Troy Williams, who recently came on So Booking Cool, and he is a part of the film The Prison Within. I want to know, did you get a chance to see it? And just what was your experience working with Troy? Okay.
Yeah, I watched it the day it came out. I went and rented it and watched it. And see, Troy is the reason I don't watch the news. Not just Troy, but men like Troy. I don't watch the news because the news wants to scare me and wants to keep me under its thumb. And I know that there is news like the life story of Troy Williams. I know that there is news like recovering addicts returning to their families. I know that there is news and hope in this world that the press doesn't choose to focus on. I saw the film. It's funny because I actually interviewed him on my podcast the day before the film came out. And so very timely. What was my experience with him? I met Troy when I went into San Quentin State Prison for restorative justice symposium that he and other men from the inside held, educating the public about the restorative justice and the work that they were doing inside. He invited me to speak at that symposium about the work that I was doing inside of the county jail, because I was doing some of the first work in Alameda County that had ever been done. It was restorative justice inside. I had a class, the first class of its kind, and I also was doing circle work Tuesday nights, 3 hours with women, and Wednesday nights, 3 hours with men. Those groups, by the way, had like 20 people in each of them and a waiting list longer than you can even count. And we couldn't satisfy the need. So put a pin in that, and maybe we can get back to it. Speaking of systems that need to rehabilitate. So yeah, I was talking about that at the symposium, and Troy and I got to pull off to the side a little bit and chit chat, and we did that a few different times. And after he was released, he had, approached the parole board on multiple occasions and was finally released. Then he and some others held a training for facilitators of the Vogue work that they were doing inside the victim offender education groups that they had been doing inside, because they wanted to start facilitators trainings outside so that we could build this, soothe the soil of our communities, right? So I did this training with him, and I already knew that I loved him. I already knew that he was the kind of guy I wish I could have my brothers hang out with. But I got to see how playful and fun he can be also between segments. He's deathly earnest when it comes to this work that he does, and to the prison system and reformation and all of the work. But boy, is he a silly little kid too, which is wonderful, because there has to be joy in the pain. That's one of the things I think that is paramount in recovery of any kind, is that we learn to have simultaneous grief and joy. Right? We're not under the delusion anymore that the grief will fade, but we learn to live in both of them. And I think that is what that's what creates the tomorrow I hope for.
Yes, Jen, absolutely. So tell us about, your novel, Soul Not Skin. becoming the me I was meant to be.
Yep. This little guy right here is a real victory. I wrote this book. It was just time. As I said, I've always been a writer. And I always wanted to write a book, but I didn't know what I was going to write about. And I had folders and folders and folders digitally and otherwise that just had scribbles and writing and writing and writing, and none of it seemed to come together. And then, I don't know, I was pregnant with it. It was time, you know? And I think in hindsight, what needed to happen is I needed to heal from a lot of what I'd been through, right? Somebody said one time that you got to write from the scars. You can't write from the wound. And I thought that was pretty powerful. So I kind of adopt that. The book is about me. It would be a memoir, except that I battled with that. Everybody whose story I tell pieces of in order to tell my own, they're still alive. And we are always in repair, my family. And in that ongoing repair, I wanted to honor the fact that not everybody has been on the healing journey that I'm on. And so what made it into the book is all stuff that everybody in my family got to read the first draft. And there are a few scenes that I decided to take out because I had two people in my family say, I love you and I know it's your story and I know it's your book and you can do what you want to do, but I just need to say that I'm not really comfortable with that being in there. And so I had to consider whether or not I could tell my story effectively without that piece. And so two stories hit the cutting floor that I really loved, that were really well written, but I think told a little more than people were prepared to be identified as responsible for. So I called it fiction, and I said that it's based on a true story, and I changed the names. And I told my family that way, if somebody recognizes them in it, or, my friends, if somebody recognizes them in it, then they have an out. They can just say, I don't know what she's talking about there. She must have made that part up to make the rest of the story flow. I don't know. It's the book that I needed when I was young and loving God and feeling ostracized and excommunicated from the church. So to speak, my heart felt that way. There had never been any formal ceremony, but as a young girl who came out as gay at about 14 to myself and every day of my life since to others, it was a book that I wished had been there for me, and it talks about alcoholism, and it talks about divorce, and it talks about promiscuity and, sexual, rape or date rape or, just all of the difficult questions and things around those topics. My hope is that it finds who it needs to find. I pray on a daily basis, not on a daily basis about my book, but when I think about my book, I pray that it reaches who it needs to reach. I don't think it'll ever be a bestseller. Maybe it will and surprise me, but I think that my purpose with it is that I go out there and find the folks that need to see some light in whatever closet they might be in. We all have closets. Closet is shame. Closet is, if somebody knew this about me, I don't think that they would love me. Or the closet is, people don't love me because of this, and so I have to pretend like I'm okay with that. The closet is that place where we are hiding our hearts so that we can survive. And so I think it's proven to be a lot more universal of a story than I had expected. People who are not gay, who are not alcoholic, who do not have a family that was divorced, are really finding themselves in it and saying that it's generated some incredible conversations in their book groups and with their friends.
How did your family respond to you doing a fictional version of your story?
Well, it didn't come out of nowhere, so everybody was you know, I had been healing through my recovery program for years and kind of calling them and owning up to my mess. And so they knew that we were going to start, they knew that Jen was all about getting real and digging through it. So not everybody was comfortable with it. And I tried to do it as fairly as possible when I approached them to talk about things that I wanted to talk about. My stand-up comedy career, God bless everybody who was ever in an audience, was large part therapy, I think, for me, working stuff out. It was funny too, but mostly it was working stuff out. And some of the stuff that I worked out on stage was all of the time that I spent in bars as a kid with my mom and my mom's drinking. And, you know, I worked through a lot of that pain on stage. My mother, God bless her, would come to the shows. So she saw a lot of that. She saw me saying that stuff out loud. And she said it was really hard for her at first, but eventually she knew that it was just a performance and that, you know, that she was glad that I had something to use to heal, because she knows that she wishes she had done better. And my father knew that I was working in the jails and prisons and holding him and our family and alcoholism and separation and all of that up in my classrooms as a tool for connection with my students. I shared with him that I had been talking about the abuse and all of those things. And he said, well, you know, God is incredible and he'll use our mess to heal people. If you think it's helping, then I'm glad that you've got it. And I'm sorry that you've got it, but I'm glad that you've got it. So by the time it came time to write the story, they appreciated my father asked me not to use my last name, his last name. He said, don't use my last name. I said, Dad, that's my last name. It's not just your last name, it's my last name. You gave it to me. You want me to carry it in all other aspects. So, but ultimately I decided to, you know, there were a few times in the story where a character called me by my last name frequently in reality. And so I had them calling me by my last name in the book, and I changed that to my first name. And SluMac is, as I said, a combination of my father's name and my wife's father's name. And so that codes him a little bit too. So these are decisions that I made along the way, deciding that my relationship with them is more important than me doing what felt to them like throwing them under the bus. I chose my battles. I argued with myself about my right to tell my story, but ultimately I feel like I did. Ultimately, I think that the book serves the purpose I intended for it to serve, and that was to help folks who are in situations where these things are real for them and they can't talk about it, so they feel alone.
Do you feel exposed at all, or is it more of a cathartic experience to have people who know you personally read your book and say, wow, I didn't know that, you know, Jen or Ginny experienced these things?
Honestly, when I hear that, what I feel when I hear that is it's not about me. It's about somebody's heart opened and felt safer. I know it sounds so freaking Care Bear rainbowy unicorny. As it's coming out of my mouth, that sounded ridiculously sweet, but it's true. Like there's one person who told me, she's like, I never would have guessed that stuff was going on in your life. And her perception of me was so very different than what I was feeling inside. And what that does for me is that just sort of validates our human experience. It's what gives me the desire to do the work that I do, because I know that we all pretend that we're okay. And I mean, a lot of times we are. I'm not saying that we're all this, like, you know, mess of ooze and trauma, but a lot of us are in pain and we don't make space to talk about it. And so if somebody else can see themselves in me, that might just open up, you know, the space that they get to sit in with themselves a little bit, right? A little bit more oxygen in that like closet of theirs. And maybe a little bit more courage to say, maybe I'm not so unique. And as we continue to do that, you know, Troy Williams said one time, one of the things that I take away from being with Troy and working with Troy that I love about what he said goes to this point, and that is, he said, you know, Jen, when I was in the height of my gang banging days, all I was doing was taking care of my family and taking care of my community. And that's all I'm doing today. But I've had the opportunity to have my family and my community grow exponentially. So the motivation that he has for the work that he does is to care for his people. And now his people is humanity, right? Primarily folks that have been through similar situations that he's endured and experienced and come up against, because he has firsthand knowledge of that. But it's sort of having people comment about those connections with the storyteller in my book helps me to feel like I'm maybe chipping away at the isolation that so many of us feel, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's the hope. That's the hope that I have, right? That's the hope that I have, is I've kept to myself. I kept to myself for so many years the things that hurt the most. And I learned that when I said them out loud, appropriately, in the right group of folks, you know, that I could be healed. I could be free of them. And it all started when I found a book at a bookstore in Chicago. You know, I had gone into this woman's bookstore. I was in the height of my drinking, and I went into this bookstore and I asked if they had any books on alcoholism. And the lady said, on what? And I said, on alcoholism. And she said, I don't know. I don't think so. And she said, let me check. And so they looked, and they found one book on the shelf, and it was a memoir. And it was called Drink, a Love Story. And I read that book like 3 times, and it gave me a little more space in my shame to breathe. I was like, okay, I'm not alone. Somebody else wrote this down. And so I wanted to build that book for others. And when I get those kinds of comments from readers, that's how I feel like, you know, God and I have done that.
Wow.
I don't give short answers.
No, you give great, thorough answers, Jen. You know what? You do. What is your advice for youth right now, and even grown people who just feel like they still need to heal? People who are queer, and the trauma that they have had to experience because of other people, alcoholism, all of it. What can you say to the people, Jen?
I'll tell you this, and I tell my son this. People are a mess. Period. That's all. And you don't know at what stage of the mess they're in. But we are all a mess. And love is bigger than our mess. Some people call love God. Some people, there's all kinds of names for love. Love is always bigger than the mess. So if people have you discouraged, if people have taught you, or institutions have taught you, or social constructs have taught you that you are not worthy, that you don't have access, that you don't deserve love, call bullshit and go look for it, because it's there for you. You just have to know that you deserve it. And that's one of the greatest horrors, I believe, of our society, is that so many people are successfully taught that they don't deserve love.
Yeah. Do you see that ever changing?
I don't know that it will ever change entirely. I think it's human nature. I do believe, from personal experience and from watching others, that every life cycle has the potential of moving from darkness to light. And every human being has the opportunity to have been lied to, put into shame's closet, and then seek the truth and be free. And my life and my hope is that I can serve as an inspiration for people to acknowledge the pain or the difficulty, or here's one, or acknowledge the fact that they don't think they have any pain or anything to heal from. Because y'all got some work to do too. I think that teenagers will always be teenagers. I think folks who chose to stop growing and engaging with life years ago because of their own pain or their own what about me's may never change. But I think that there is always a population of alive people who want more, who seek life, who know that their pain is not the end of the story. And I want to use my life to speak hope into theirs.
On that note, Jen SluMac, everyone. Jen, oh wow, it was a pleasure to speak with you today. I so appreciate it and would love to speak with you again, like in the future and everything.
I would love that.
I'm so glad that you're up for that as well. Let everyone know how they can keep up with you and stay updated, get Soul Not Skin, listen to your wonderful podcast, all of it.
I have a website and you can find everything there. And the website is the same as the title of my book, which is soulnotskin.com. And you'll find the podcast there. You'll find access to the book. The book is in paperback, Audible, and Kindle. And yeah, you can contact me through my website. And that is all.
Guys, make sure you all do that, okay? And I love the whole Soul Not Skin and how you made it not only your title, but the name of your website as well. Yeah.
It's been my email for a long time. And when I was looking for a title of the book, one of the teachers that I worked with at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County, she and I were back and forthing about my book coming out, and I had a title on it. She goes, "Why don't you call it Soul Not Skin? That feels like you. That just feels like that. There's so much in that could be." And I was just like, "I don't know. That's my email." And she said, "I think you should name it that." I was like, so I thought about it. I prayed on it, and there it is.
Praying on it. Awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate you. Can I just say that? Thank you for what you do, and thank you for lifting up stories of hope. And just, you know, it takes a lot of work to put together, organize, conduct, edit, publish. I know what it takes, and so I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate those kind words. Yeah, and I know you know exactly what that's like, and you do the same thing. You lift people up and everything. Yeah, it's great.
It's important.
It is important. It really is. You know, guys, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, so booking cool.